back to the Profit Roadmap. As always, we're your hosts, Ryan and Becca. This is the premier podcast created for field service pros to help you grow your business, stay on top of the latest trends, and help you provide even more value to the communities that you serve. Now, I've got a fun one for you guys today. We wanted to talk about leadership. So who better than to bring on the guy who leads us all here? So we've got the General Manager of Field Services here at Xplor Technologies, Terence Cummings. Terence, how you doing today?
Doing good, Ryan. Great to see you and glad to be here. Excited to talk with you guys today.
Absolutely. We've got a fun one lined up for us.
Looking forward to it for sure.
All right. So Terence, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's been a fun journey. I will tell you. I think like most leaders, I cut my teeth in the trenches, if you will. Started out being a sales guy. Didn't know that sales was what I was going to do. Like most people, I went to school and probably not doing what I paid a lot of money to do, which is I went to school for mass communications. I'm not doing anything like that. Haven't done anything that resembles that. So. It started off sales and something that I really had a passion for, something that I really got good at, and so I said, "Hey, I think I can make other people good at this. Like it's something that's fun, and I enjoy like developing and coaching people." And got into leadership, and I realized that is such a small part of leadership. Like that is a part of it. It's a critical part of it. But at the end of the day, it's not really what makes you an effective and successful leader. And so I've been very fortunate to have some leaders that kind of really showed me the way. And quite honestly, you know what? I've had some leaders that actually showed me not to do it. And I think that's equally as important because you need to really learn, what it is that you're really good at and what it is that really people respond to. And in order to do that, you got to have the good and the bad. And so I've been able to say I've been under some great leaders. One that recently left us, Connie Sortusi, who I worked with for 10 plus years at Sage Software, where I sort of spent 15 and a half years in various leadership roles across the organization. And about a year ago, July, came over, was fortunate to join Xplor and specifically help with the field services division. So kind of a quick journey of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, awesome, man. So throughout your career here in field services, it's been a little over a year with us. What's been sort of the biggest shift that you've seen in the approach that you have to leadership, and what do you think sparked that change?
Wow, great question. I think the thing that's been most challenging yet most exciting is we have done a phenomenal job in field services of hiring the right people and developing and promoting them from within. The exciting part about that is just seeing young talent and seeing aha moments and seeing the growth and development. The reason it was a challenge for me is because having been in leadership for over 20 years, I had to kind of get back to the grassroots, right? To the basics of being a leader, because with that comes inexperience and with that becomes leaders who have really starting to figure their footing out, kind of like where I was when I started out. And so it was a challenge because I had to dust off some skills and I had to sort of reach back in the archive, if you will, and say, wait a minute, I've been for the last 10 plus years managing experienced leaders and, people who sort of just needed me to help them map through and sort of navigate through things that they hadn't experienced, but not necessarily help people with their fundamentals. And so it's been a challenge because, with that comes a lot more direction and a lot more guidance. Like I'm a firm believer as a leader in an organization, you have three priorities, right? And your priorities are strategy, obviously driving results, and then coaching and developing people. And so the only thing that shifts between those three is the percentage of time that you do doing what, right? So let me give you a specific example. If you're a frontline manager and you're managing individual contributors on a daily basis, you are spending, 60% of your time coaching and developing. You're spending, 30% of your time driving results. And then you're spending that last 10% on strategy. When you get to the GM level, it's a polar opposite. You're spending 70 to 80% of your time on strategy. You're spending 10 to 15% of that time on, driving revenue, and then the rest you're spending on coaching and development. because your drive is to drive the business in the future and think about where we need to go next. I had to shift those percentages in this role, right? Even though I should have been spending a large percentage of my time in strategy, I had to dial it back and spend a lot more time in the coaching and development piece. And so that was a big shift for me. And the reason I said it was fun was because I hadn't really done it in so long that it was exciting. Like, because like the most what I get most satisfaction of is seeing people reach their potential, like seeing people realize what their talent is. I don't like the word potential, and I'll tell you why. Potential to me implies that you have the ability, but you haven't realized it, right? It's there, but you haven't really truly reached it. So the potential to me is not a great word. To me, the word is like watching people grow into that talent, right? Watching people grow into it, because potential could never be realized. Like, you can always have potential. You can always have potential, but to actually achieve it and reach that, to me, is what it's about. And so it's about getting people to get to that place where they're trying to get to is really what's been the biggest shift and the biggest challenge for me. And I think that's what has been the biggest spark in the change in the way I lead since I've been with field services.
Kind of analogy, like it's already there. Like instead of potential, it is there. You're just watching, you're helping them grow
Exactly.
to that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Do you think it's essential to have that like mindset as a leader, or can anyone be a leader? Or are there like essential skills or things that you have to bring on and grow and to be a leader?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm probably going to give an answer people don't want to hear. The answer is no. Not everyone can be a leader, and I will tell you why. Being a leader is exhausting. I remember my days of, sitting in the chair, carrying a bag, as they say for salespeople, and always looking at your manager, and they don't do anything all day. Like, they don't have to be on the phone and hear rejection and hear no and get yelled at. Like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. Like, I can do that. And you realize it is a lot different, because the pressure that comes from driving a business, the pressures that come from bringing people along on the journey, the pressure that comes from people wanting to be great, and knowing that it's very time consuming and emotionally draining to be able to show up every single day, and regardless of what's going on, put on a face of confidence, and be able to keep people inspired and motivated, is a very daunting task that I think people think they want, but the reality of it is they really don't, right? I always talk about like the difference between being an aunt and uncle and a parent. Like, when you're an aunt and uncle, you get to play with the kids, and when they're sleepy and fussy, right, like, you get to go home. Like, you get to go home. When you're
Yeah.
no, there is no going home. Like, you are there through it, through the thick and thin. And so not everyone wants to do it. I think if people really wanted to do it, everyone has the ability. But I don't think everybody wants to do it, and I don't think everybody is built to do it. So that's why I don't think anyone can be a leader. It takes a lot out of you to be a leader, and not everybody wants that responsibility.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with that. Like you said, that might be kind of an unpopular opinion, but I agree with you on that.
Good, I'm
Right.
glad, because
It takes it. Yeah. So like if you're looking at, becoming a leader, maybe you're not a leader yet, but you're looking at becoming one, like, I think there is a level of self-discovery you need to do to determine if that is the right path for you. Because being a leader isn't the only way to be successful, whether you're running a business or you're working in a business. And if it's not for you, then carry that bag elsewhere, if it will.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that you need that. Like, everybody can't be a chief. Like, everybody can't be the one making decisions. And I think that's where you see dissension and chaos, is when everyone's trying to lead. You need people that are great at following, and you need people that are great at executing, right? Because it doesn't matter how great the strategy is if you don't have the people to execute the strategy. And there's a lost belief that, the people aren't an important part of any organization. Like, at the end of the day, my job as a leader is to create a strategy, build a foundation in which people can be successful and continue to remove the barriers that are preventing them from doing that. But the people are the ones, they are the heartbeat of any organization, of any successful plan. It doesn't matter. And so leadership is a role that needs to exist. But in my opinion, it's not the heartbeat of an organization. It is the people that are the heartbeat in the organization. So we need people that don't want to be leaders. We need people that want to go and drive. And so that's a very critical role in any organization. And I think people need to realize that.
Absolutely. So let's pivot a little bit. So here at Xplor Field Services, we've sort of got two. There's more to it, but there's two sides of the house. We've got like the service autopilot side, we've got the FieldEdge side, and we are split up over 3 major geographic locations. So we've got people interspersed and everything since 2020. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was culture. Because culture is, I think, very, very key to the success of an organization and whether or not you like coming to work every day, right? So when you're managing these teams across these different locations, how do you maintain a consistent company culture while still allowing for adaptability at the local level?
Yeah, no, that's critical question. You know, the old cliche, culture is king. Um, I think with anything, it's around defining what the culture is, right? So many times culture is not defined, and we loosely use terms or expressions that, you know, we want people that feel entitled and empowered to make decisions. But what does that really mean? Like, the problem is that statement means something different to everyone. So the key to me in having a culture that transcends time zones, that transcends roles, responsibilities, is clearly defining what the culture is and what it means, right? It doesn't need to be a 30-minute elevator pitch. It doesn't need to be such, you know, grandiose statements. In fact, I would say the more simple, the better, because it's more easy to interpret. So it's defining the culture very clearly, but then the most important part of it is consistently living with it. And so what that means is that sometimes it's really easy to waver on things and to sort of, that's not that big of a deal if we don't do it today. Like, nobody will care if we don't do it today. And the second you compromise that, the second that it's really not a culture. Like, if you can forego doing something, then it's not your culture. It's what you want your culture to be. And there's a difference between that, right? It's like, you know, it's a very deep example, but it's like breathing is a thing that we have to do to live. It's not optional. Like, it's not something that we can say, I don't think I'm gonna breathe tomorrow. I'm gonna take a break from breathing. I'm a little bit tired. Like, that's the same thing with culture. Like, you cannot waver on what your culture is and what's important to you. We had a leadership team meeting yesterday, and this was one of the topics, was around culture and how do we live it? How do we bring it to life? And it's really about whatever we say we are, it not being optional. It's not when it's convenient. It's not, you know, how we feel. It's who we are in our DNA. It's like breathing every day. It has to be done. And we have to be consistent around how we engage our people. Because I will tell you, like, people who work remotely probably feel more disconnected than people that are in office, right? Because they're not around their peers. They're not necessarily with people every day. They don't get the benefit of the energy of their neighbor. They don't get the benefit of listening and having those water cooling conversations. So it's more important for those people that are in different offices or working remotely for that consistency, so they can feel included and they can feel part of the journey that the organization is on. So I say it's just clearly defining the culture and then consistently living it.
That certainly is key. I benefited from being in the office before COVID, so like that culture was so essential. And I think leadership has just done a great job because it's a huge transition from taking a team over multiple states,
Yeah,
all like permanently remote, but still
yeah,
maintaining that culture and team meetings and
yeah, yeah.
transparency. So yeah,
That's, and Becca, I want to jump in there because you said something that I think a lot of companies, ourselves included, struggled with their culture. a lot of companies weren't built to be remote. Like if you think about organizations and you think about how they interact with their customers, how they interact with their employees, a lot of it has been face to face. And so when you're asking leaders who've never managed remote people, you're asking leaders who've never managed people, over a phone, like that's a transition. Even the way people learn, like people learn differently when it's over a computer versus being in a classroom. Companies, schools included, they weren't prepared for that because teaching people over a computer is a lot different skill than teaching people in person. Same thing with being a salesperson. Like what makes a salesperson is the ability to read body language, is the ability to use like how I'm using my hands now. It's the ability to use this to understand and read your people. Like one of the most simple sales things that you learn very early on is when you're talking to a person and you want them to agree with you and you say, so you can understand how this would help your business grow, right, Becca? You're gonna nod with me.
Yeah.
It's human nature. But I lose that. And if it's not something I learned to do over the phone or via camera, that's a skill that you lose. And so part of that culture is the ability to adapt and transition to new ways of working. And that's why a lot of cultures have been stunted a little bit because companies have had to reinvent themselves. And that's been a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the importance is of instilling culture in new hires? So we're bringing somebody onto a team. Like, how important is it to get them on board with culture as soon as possible? And how do you actually go about instilling that culture?
Yeah, critical. I mean, it's the first impression that someone has, right? So when you think about someone joining an organization, their typical first impression is the recruiter that they interact with, right? Their next impression is the next person they interview with, whether it's a hiring manager or someone else. Like that sort of begins what the experience is like for that person. From that point on, it's whatever you bring them to becomes their expectation. So I give you an example, something very simple, but like everyone on their first day at the job, they come up, they're dressed to impress, right? Because they're like, it's the first
Yeah.
day, they don't know. They're like, okay, business casual, what does that mean? They come in and they, have on all their good stuff and they're looking good. And they look around and everybody's like super casual. What do you think they do the next day? They immediately change the way they dress because the standard at that moment has been set. And going forward, what they do is they adopt to the culture they're in, they adopt to the environment they're in. So if day one, you bring someone into the culture and you don't hold them to the level of standard of expectation you have, you've now reprogrammed them and you've basically now given them the belief that what the rest of their journey is like is not going to be what they thought it was when they interviewed. And so setting that expectation during the interview process and then living that is important. And I think the way you establish it is I'm a big believer when you bring people on, all leaders should sit down and have an expectations meeting. Like again, it's the art of interpretation, right? Just because this person has X number of years in the industry, whatever, that was with another company, that was within
Right.
a different journey. You got to bring them in and talk about what great looks like. You've got to bring them in and talk about what's important and what you expect of them. And then you've got to hold them to the standard from day one. And so I think you instill it in day one. And I think the importance is then where I think a lot of leaders make mistakes are when people deliver the behavior that you expect, you have to acknowledge it so they know what great looks like. And when they don't, you have to acknowledge it so they know what great doesn't look like, right? So it's that constant reinforcement of what you've established in that expectation meeting that is so critical for them to understand. Because once you kind of assimilate them into that culture, they are now the people that are going to continue to carry that torch. And they're going to, at some point, be a part of the next new hire's journey. And what I always want them to say is, listen, these 3 to 5 things are not negotiable here. Like I'm just telling you right now, if you're not going to be able to buy into them, you're probably not going to make it here. And so it's important that day one from the first interaction that we live, breathe, every day what we say is expected of them, and going back to what I said, which is not waver on what that culture is supposed to look like.
Beautifully put.
Absolutely. Consistency is key.
Yes.
So I once interviewed a manager years ago because I just wanted to understand what was leadership like, right? And
Yeah.
I was told that one of the most challenging things of being a leader is handling or managing the different personalities. So I'm
Yes.
curious, is that true as a leader? And then I want to go further into the challenging moments you faced and how
Yeah.
it may have shaped your management style in your career.
Yeah. So I would say early on, I would completely agree with that, Becca. I think what's been one of the biggest aha moments for me was something my dad told me when I was too young to understand. And as I've gotten older and in leadership, like I had a light bulb moment. So my dad said to me a long time ago, he said, if you don't have expectations of people, you'll never be disappointed. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, how could you not have expectations? Like, that was the dumbest thing you've ever said, Dad. Like, I cannot, but what he was saying was differently was meet people where they are, right? So the problem and challenge that we have as leaders is that we expect everyone to be a certain way, and we expect everyone to think a certain way, and we expect everyone to be like us. Like we expect, listen, look at me, I've been successful. These are the things I did. You need to do those things too. No, not everyone's path is not the same. Not everyone is motivated by the same things. And so what you have to learn to do is understand what makes people tick. Like we talked about earlier, not everyone has aspiration to be in leadership. Some people want to be Oz, they want to be behind the curtain, they want to be behind the scenes. Some people just want to be that person that helps others be successful. Like you've got to meet people where they are. You've got to allow them to be who they are, and you've got to understand them. What's their why? Like, what's Becca's why? Because if I understand your why, I understand why you do the things you do. I understand what's important to you. It's like in sales, like leaders are always giving people spiffs, right? Financial compensation for doing a certain outcome. Not everybody's money motivated. Not everybody's coin operated. Some people would rather say, I go home an hour early on Friday. Like I'd rather get off at 12 than get $500. Like some people would say, I'd rather have my name shout out in a team meeting than go home at 12. So the problem is that leaders, what happens is we put out a spiff and we say $500 for whoever does this. And we wonder why not everybody's working as hard as we want them to, because some people aren't incentivized by that. Like that doesn't make me want to work harder. And so when you first start, it can feel different with the different personalities. And it's because we try to put people in a box and we try to make them be the way we want them to be for what's easiest for us to lead and develop versus understanding and meeting them where they are and kind of bringing it back full circle, which is if I didn't have an expectation of what I wanted them to be, then I wouldn't be disappointed because 9 times out of 10, people in our lives are going to disappoint us because we build them or we force them to be who we want them to be versus allowing them to be who they are. And so that's what he meant. Like if you don't have expectations of people, you'll never be disappointed.
Yeah,
That's so I relate.
yeah.
When you're like 13.
I was going to say, it's like a beautiful nugget of wisdom that you just get way too early in life.
Yeah.
Ryan, I mean, I could tell you guys stories about things that my dad, like at the time, I'm like, what? And, you know, but I appreciate them because it was like aha moments in certain moments of my life when I was like, oh, you know, it's like a bunch of Yoda things. I'm like, what? Is my dad Yoda? Like, what does that mean? So, you know, and but back to your question, it's like that's what happens as a leader is you make mistakes and you learn and you get in those situations again and you go, I remember this and I'm going to pivot and I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach in solving this problem this time. And that's why one of my favorite sayings is you either win or you learn. Like there's no such thing as losing because at the end of the day, if you learn something that you can apply later, the mistake was worth it. Because if you hadn't gone through it, you wouldn't know what to do the next time you were necessary. Like if you win all the time, like I'm a big sports fan. And you always talk about like sports teams or individual players that dominate. The first time they face adversity, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it because they've never faced adversity. They've never had to climb uphill. And so the first time they climb uphill, they have no idea how to handle it. And so I think that's where getting to your question around why people think it's so difficult is because until you face it, you don't know how to handle it.
Like that. Do you think as a leader, because you said something that made me think about you either like you learn a lesson, or you were like successful. Do you think as a leader you need to give yourself room to make mistakes? Uh, 'cause I agree. They're like mistakes are like the golden nuggets for me. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now I know what not to do. Even mistakes from other people,
Yeah.
lessons from me, valuable free lessons sometimes. Like take the
Yeah.
lesson. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a different lens because I think that's a great question. I think one of the flaws of leaders is that sometimes we overly in fear of people making mistakes. And the problem with that is that you're not allowing their development, right? You're not allowing their ability. I mean, sometimes someone will bring me a thought or idea and I will talk them through it. And sometimes I may think it's not going to work, but I allow them to go through it because I understand at the end of the day, listen, I say this all the time. We're selling software. We're not saving lives. There's not going to be a mistake that we make that's going to kill anybody or that's going to get the company shut down, right? So sometimes we got to go through those mistakes. And I kind of know how the movie's going to go because I've seen it before. But people need to go through that. The important thing is you need to circle back and ask them, okay, what would you done differently? Like now that you've been through it, what would you do differently? How would you thought about this another way? Because it's not everybody gets the lesson, right? Not everybody understands like, oh, because it's really easy to blame outside circumstances for why it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because of this. It didn't work because of that. Well, or maybe it didn't work because it wasn't a good plan. And so now that we've agreed that it wasn't a good plan, what can we do differently next time? And so I think, yes, you have to make mistakes, but you have to allow for mistakes. Because again, we talked about how people learn. Some people learn because they can live off of our mistakes and they can go, okay, well, Ryan did that once. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Some people have to make the mistake. It's kind of like, don't touch that. That's hot. Ow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I told you it was hot. You didn't believe me, but
Right.
now that you've touched it, now you believe me. Like hearing it wasn't good enough for you to believe it. You actually had to see for yourself. And so some leaders need to make that mistake to learn the lesson, while others are a little bit more preventative and they just need to hear about it to learn the lesson. And so again, getting back to meeting people where they are, it's leading people based upon how they learn and how they develop and allowing them to make that mistake so that they can get better from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, giving people the room to mess up is crucial. And as long as they have the right mindset around what failure and like what failure is and how to recover and how to adapt from it, super powerful.
But remember, Ryan, it's not failure, it's learning.
It's learning. It's
Failing.
learning.
They're not failing, they're learning, right?
Yeah.
Like
You win or you
the
learn.
only time it becomes a failure is if you keep doing it, right? The definition of insanity, like expecting a different result. But if you truly make a mistake and as long as you learn from it, then it's not a failure. I mean, we use that word and I understand why you used it because we're conditioned. Like I was looking at a video the other day and it talked about how we're programmed to see the wrong in things, right? And so the example they used was a teacher wrote 1 through 10 on a board, but she wrote the numbers 2 and 3 out of order. So she wrote 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. And she asked her students, okay, everybody take a look at this. What do you see? And everybody said, you got it wrong. She's like, well, what do you mean I got it wrong? She said, you wrote 1, 3, 2, 4. So if you think about it, though, from a success rate, there are 10 numbers on the board. You got 2 out of 10 wrong, but that was considered a failure. You got 80% of it right, but you got 2 wrong. So we're conditioned to see what's wrong. Like they immediately, when they looked at it, they looked for what was wrong versus looking for what was right. And because that's how we're conditioned, right? And so that's why as leaders, it's so important to allow people to have a safe space. So one of the things I did with my leadership team was we were struggling to generate new ideas. I remember I told you this is a young leadership team. Most of them, developed, promoted from within, and people were afraid to think outside of the box. They were afraid to do things differently because of fear of making a mistake, but lack of experience. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay for every bad idea that you bring me. So if you bring me a bad idea and it's just an awful idea, I'm going to give you money. Well, how much is it? Depends on, the value of the money will be based upon how bad the idea is. Obviously, the goal was not it's like I wasn't.
Yeah,
It was the goal was to get people to think outside of the box. It was to get people to think disruptively, and I knew that they would come with what they thought were outside of the box thoughts, which was what I wanted. I wanted to condition their brains to think differently, to condition them to be a little bit more risk takers. And in order to do that, I had to incentivize them in a way that would think about now. You're saying, Terence, you contradict yourself because you said everybody's coin operated. Yes, not everybody is coin operated. And so that could have absolutely backfired. But the point I'm making is that I wanted to get them to think different. And in order to do that, I had to create a mechanism. Instead of just saying, guys, think differently, think bigger, think like I had to try to somehow gamify it so that, and literally like, it was like, hey, I think I may have a dumb idea. I will tell both of you, I don't think I heard one dumb idea. I heard a lot of extreme ideas or really left field ideas, but none of them were bad. They were just things that people hadn't considered or ever thought about doing before. And that's ultimately what I wanted to accomplish.
It's a very interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
So it was very good.
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out for you.
So
and you got the ideas you wanted. So everybody won.
I feel like that kind of mind conditioning should start in childhood, because I grew up like that, like just being afraid to fail, so I didn't try. So if I had the mindset, you're just learning. It's not failure. You're learning a lesson. It helps not stunt someone from like pursuing. So yeah.
Do you think that's something that maybe people that are newer leadership or it's something that they're starting to gain experience with? Like, is that something that you think they should like sit down with their team and be like, guys, it's okay to mess up?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to create a safe space for people as a leader, period, right? I think a lot of it is not only just saying it, Ryan, though, but it's your reaction when it happens, right? So after they make that, that mistake, do you explode? Do you bite their head off? Do you make them feel like they're the worst person in the world? Or do you calmly sit down and talk through the decision, talk through the thought process, and help them sort of see for themselves where they went left or right? Because part of the lesson in learning is the ability to figure it out, right? It's not just me telling you, well, this is what you should have done differently. It's you coming to that conclusion on your own. But it's how you then talk through and coach through the lesson, the opportunity, because that safe space is really giving people the belief that if they do something that wasn't the right outcome, that it truly is okay. There's a story, I'll tell it really, really quickly, but there's a story about a sales guy who had this customer. It was a big, like $10 million deal, and he lost the deal. And he went to the office and he started packing up his stuff. And the leader came out and was like, well, what are you doing? He goes, well, I obviously lost the big deal. I know I'm getting fired. And he looked at him and he said, I just paid $10 million for your education. Why would I fire you? Like, that is a great example of how you handle a mistake. Is he could have very easily said, absolutely, you're fired. Like, get out. But he didn't, because what he realized was it was an investment. That mistake was going to make him that much better of a salesperson, because he was always going to remember that and look back on that and say, what could I have done differently? Why did this go south? Because I don't want to make that mistake again. So I tell you, leadership, nobody ever really talks about this. There's a lot of psychology in leadership. There's a lot of ability of lifting people up. And giving people confidence, and while keeping them humble, very candidly, because while there needs to be a little bit of arrogance in our people, there needs to be a little bit of humility that comes along with it. And so there's a saying I like to say about being a leader is you have to know when to break and you have to know when to pedal. And what that means is you have to know when to push people because there's more they can do. But you also have to know when people are beating themselves up and they're doing everything they can and when to kind of peel back, right? And so that's why I talk about the psychology of leadership is I need to look at Becca, I need to look at Ryan, I need to go, Becca's, I mean, like she's doing everything. She's working all hours of the day. She's researching. She's doing this, and this didn't go the way she wanted. If I jump on her right now, that is going to absolutely destroy her. But I see Ryan, and I know he's not really giving as much as I know he's capable of giving. And I probably am like, Ryan, you know what? Is this your best work? Like, do you, like, at the end of the day, if you were to release this podcast, would you feel it was one of your better ones? And Ryan's going to go, yeah, not really. All right. Okay. Well, if you don't think it is, I tell you what, I give you another day. Go back, look at it, think about what you think you'd want to do differently, and put it on my desk tomorrow. And I'm pushing him, right? Keeping him inspired because I know he didn't really give his best work. And so as a leader, that psychology is knowing what your people need from you when they need it. And that's where it's like, again, when I talk about it's a lot more demanding than people think, it's not just about telling people what they need to do. I'm a firm believer. No one wakes up, logs into their computer and goes, I want to suck today. Like I want to be really bad at my job. I want my boss to yell at me. I'm going to do everything I can to get, like no one does that. Like no one does it. It's just that people sometimes get off of the path, lose their way. And you got to help them get back there. So telling someone you need to do X, they know that. They understand what their job is. The challenge is either they don't know how to do X, they're struggling to do X, or they think they're doing X effectively, and you just need to give them clarity around what great looks like. So that is, again, when you talk about being leadership, there's a lot of psychology that comes in it to be an effective leader.
A lot to think about.
Sorry, I know I'm rambling.
No, this is awesome. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this because you're dropping hella wisdom.
Like a master class, seriously. Yeah,
right?
That's what it feels.
So let's continue that thread a little bit, right? So when it comes to developing future leaders, we've talked a little bit about kind of a younger management team and all that stuff. What's your approach to developing those future leaders within the organization, especially when it comes to promoting from within and like fostering that leadership?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's really around clarity of what great looks like, right? And then I think it's about reinforcing what that is. So I mentioned earlier, like you have to let people know when they're demonstrating the behavior that you want, and you have to let them know when they're not demonstrating the behavior you want. And it needs to be in the moment. Timing is so important because when it's fresh on their mind, when it's top of mind, when they're in that moment is when they're going to be able to most quickly reflect on it. Like one of my least favorite things to do, one of the things I dislike seeing is what I call drive-by coaching, which is you overhear a conversation, you walk by, you give someone feedback, and then you keep going. Like that's it's not really good coaching. It's not really good feedback because it doesn't allow people to really be in the moment. But with new leaders, it's about that reinforcement and it's about being very specific about what you saw. So what I mean by that, a lot of people say, hey, good job today. Like, what does that mean? Like with what? Good job with what? Like I was on work on time. I can't, what can I take away and replicate tomorrow and the day after from good job today? I can't do anything with that. It's too broad. But it's about being very specific in what that coaching is. It's, hey, Ryan, I just wanted to circle back with you. I attended your staff meeting today, and I thought you really did a good job. These were the three things that jumped out at me. I thought you were very clear in your expectations and what you wanted from your people. The reason that's important is because it gives them clarity around what to accomplish today. I thought you did a really good job of recognizing the good performance of these three individual people, because I think it gives your teams inspiration and it makes people want to work hard because guess what? The next day they want to have their names mentioned in the meeting. And finally, I thought you did a really good job of being very clear and direct around the performance challenges that we were having and your displeasure around the things that weren't being done and giving specific examples of what you wanted to see differently. And because of that, I think your team is going to be able to walk out and have a very productive day and be able to deliver the results you're looking for. That is specific feedback and coaching that someone can replicate, right? And then I think the other thing and the final things is that you have to have tough conversations. Like, a lot of times people stray away from tough conversations. Many people are conflict avoidant, or they're worried they're going to upset somebody, or they're worried that, the biggest challenge, and I know no one believes this when I say it, everyone wants to be held accountable. People don't want to be micromanaged. Those are two different statements. Accountability means that you have very clear expectations, and that you and everyone else that is doing a like role is held to those same expectations. And you are very clear around the consequences or the rewards when you do said behavior, right? That's what accountability is. Micromanagement is feeling like someone is monitoring every single thing you do, when you use the restroom, when you take a break, when you took lunch, what you had for lunch. Like, that's what people feel micromanagement is. The ability to have tough conversations and give people direct feedback is so important, because one of the things I hate as a leader is for anyone that ever leaves the organization and they say, no one ever told me what I needed to do to be better. No one ever spent time helping me get better at my craft. And that's where tough conversations come in. People don't always want to hear, back to the question you asked earlier, can everybody be a leader? Not everybody wants to hear no, but what you owe them is an honest conversation that's like, listen, Becca, I think you're a superstar. I think you are amazing at what you do. I think right now, leadership is not what you should be focusing on, and here's why. Like, it's a tough conversation, but it's the best conversation for her in that moment. And so I think the critical things is clarity, reinforcement, through the conversations with specific feedback, and then the tough conversations around the things that they can do different and the things that are difficult for them to hear. You've got to instill that early in new leaders so that they can get on the right path to grow and develop.
Absolutely. To tie that back a little bit to the trades, right? Like, if you have, say you're doing lawn care, and, you do a service for a customer, they call in, and, they're not totally satisfied with like the edging that you've done or something like that. Like, again, going back to how you handle yourself as a leader, your reaction to that says a lot. But if you pull that guy in, you say, hey, Alyssa called in, she said that, this job like wasn't satisfactory. Like, let's talk about like what happened with that. You can train on that, right? And then you can teach them to be better. So it's uncomfortable. Hey, you didn't do a great job here.
Yeah.
But how do we make it better for next time?
Well, and to take that out even further, the reason that coaching is so important is because it's also going to impact that interaction that employee has with that customer next time, right? And if you coach them properly, they're going to handle it properly. Because if you don't coach it properly, what do they do? I can't believe you said something to my boss. If you didn't like it, why didn't you just say something to me instead of calling him, right? That's the reaction your customer is going to get, which is exactly what you don't want.
No.
But if you coach them properly, the conversation you get is, hey, I just wanted to apologize, Ms. Spencer. I know I messed up. John gave me a conversation. I definitely will make sure going forward I'm going to do it the way. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you letting us know, because what's important to me is making sure that you're getting the outcome that you're paying for. Like, it's good. Like, it not just impacts that employee, but it impacts how they then treat your customers. And so that's what happens with us. Like, if we yell at our people because they did something or didn't do something for a customer, when they talk to that customer again, it's very difficult then for not to have some sort of an animosity toward that customer, and they're going to take it out on the customer, which is exactly what we don't want. And so that's why that coaching, and even internally, like, if I come to Becca because she says something about Ryan and I go to her and go, you didn't do this, guess what? She doesn't like Ryan now. She doesn't want to work with Ryan. She's like, it's going to foster, getting back to that culture, it's going to create disruption in that culture, right, which is not what we want. And so that's why that feedback and to do it in a way that is productive is so important to the culture, because it starts with us. Like, I'm a firm believer, leaders set the culture, but we don't drive the culture. It's the employees that drive the culture. Our job is to set the culture and make sure that we're driving and managing to it. but the people are the culture, like at the end of the day, right? And so that's what's important.
Absolutely. So I think it's a good segue. So talking about the service industry, oftentimes we focus a lot on customer satisfaction metrics. How do you balance those metrics with meeting the internal metrics and taking care of your team's needs internally?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it. I think it's like that response that we just said. It's like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we align what our people do to how it helps our customers be happy. Like they need to see
Yeah.
the correlation between how their job makes our customers happy, right? And if they understand that and they understand what they're delivering and they understand like so again, we get back to broad statements like we need to create a great customer experience. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean if they ask for a full refund on their product, we give it to them? Because like that would make them happy. Is that what a great customer experience is? Like, is it saying, my pleasure, like they do at Chick-fil-A? Like, what is a great
Yeah.
customer experience? Like, it's a broad statement because a great customer experience is unique to an individual. But really, what it is about being very clear what you mean by great customer experience, and then making sure that the people that are delivering it are bringing the value to it every day. But then here's the caveat: you have to create a great experience for your. See, people don't use this word. Customers can be internal and external. The people that work with me are my customers. My job is to ensure that they have a great experience. Our customers that we create an amazing product and experience for, those are our external customers. So back to what I said, if I want our external customers to have a great experience, my internal customers have to have a great experience because you reciprocate it, right? Like if you think about it, when you're in a good mood, what do people say? You're in a really good mood. You seem happy today because they sense that you're in a good place, right? And it feeds off of it. So it's around making sure that we make our people clear on what we mean by great customer experience and why it's important to our customers, and then ensuring that they see how it ties back to our metrics and why we measure and drive the things we do, because we need to get them to see when these metrics. So we were talking about this the other day. When our customers demonstrate a certain behavior, there's a greater likelihood that they will continue to use our product. So we want to measure that metric, right? We want to make sure that we keep an eye on that metric because for us, it means they're happy. And if they're happy, that means they remain a customer. So it's about making sure people are clear on those metrics and why it's important to customers. But it's also about making sure our internal customers are happy because they will deliver that experience.
Yeah. I love that analogy that you have internal customers. That same exact concept came up a couple of days ago in a meeting that we had, which is something that I took a lot from the training team back when I was doing that. Is like, yeah, we train customers on the training team, but like we also have to train our new hires and we have to train these other people, and like they're no less deserving of your effort than the outside guys, the guys that are paying us money. Like, huge. Anyway.
No, but you're right, Randy. Don't cut yourself short because it goes back to your question around new hires. You are one of the first faces they see when they come into the organization. You are a critical part of their onboarding. You are a critical part of how they view our product. And so you have an opportunity to set that culture when you work with those new employees because they see your passion about the product. They see how thorough you are when you show them the product. Like it makes them realize, like, I used Chick-fil-A in that example, but it's like you have an expectation when you go to Chick-fil-A that if you actually went to a Chick-fil-A and someone was grumpy, you'd be like, whoa, like that's not normal. Like something like, who is that person? Because they've created this expectation of being helpful and being, so now that is the standard. And the standard doesn't waver. It gets back to your question. If you start a company and this is your first interaction and this is how everybody, like, you feel like I have to be like that because everyone is like that all the time. And so that's how that culture is created. And that's what it is. Like right now, I'm your customer. Like you I am your customer. You are doing this podcast with me. And so at that point, I am your customer at that moment, right? When we end the podcast, you become my customer again. But in this instance, I am your customer.
How the turntables.
Yeah.
It also got me thinking. You keep bringing up Chick-fil-A, which A, makes me hungry, but also B, I think about all of the free like Chick-fil-A advertisements that have played in my head. Anytime I go to like Taco Bell or McDonald's and someone says "my pleasure," my first thought is they must have worked at Chick-fil-A.
Exactly. No, I think the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's so much so to the point, if you go to a restaurant or any place and they say "my pleasure," you go, they're trying to be like Chick-fil-A.
Mhm.
Yeah. I didn't pick up on the my pleasure as a side note. It took me like I picked up on it last year. That's
Okay.
how like
Yeah.
You were focused on the chicken sandwich. You were focused on that number 3
the
combo.
waffle fries.
You were like,
Well,
I don't really want to talk to you. I just want my waffle fries.
it's because I usually would go to the same one by my house, but then I was out of town and I'm like, oh, they say it too. I'm like, but no, it's
Not
their
just my
thing, it's their
location.
brand.
Okay.
Yeah, they have that culture everywhere.
Yeah,
It's kind of crazy.
you're right.
Yeah, that stuff's awesome. But thanks for deciding dinner for me tonight, guys. I really appreciate that. So I'll this is the part where Alyssa sends me a message that says, Ryan, you're off the rails. So let's tie it back. What is maybe one piece of conventional leadership advice that you found doesn't actually work well in the context, maybe in like field services or just in general?
Yeah, I think in general, one thing that I'm not a big fan of is you hear a lot about the 80-20 rule, right? Spend 80% of your time.
Ooh, I've heard that a
about
lot.
20%.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of that. I just think it cripples an organization when all of your time, effort, and energy is focused on the top 20%. Because, again, I said earlier, everybody's an important part of it. Now, here's what I know. I'm sorry if this is disappointing to hear. You're never going to have a team full of A players. It's not possible. And the reason it's not possible is because the second people get better, that typically means the people above them get better, right? And so what happens is when the B's become A's, the A's become A pluses, right? Like it's just going to continue to happen. However, each of those people are a critical part of the organization, and we need to invest in them equally. Now, it doesn't mean, it's going to be very transparent, it doesn't mean that people don't earn certain benefits. Let's just be very fair, and earn some sort of, I don't want to call it special treatment because that's not fair, but a little bit of favorability, right? Because of the fact that they go above and beyond and they consistently do things. Like, you want to take care of those people that are going the extra mile. Let's just be very honest. But I think that 80-20 rule has never been like a big leadership thing that I've liked when I hear people say, focus on your top, spend 80% of your time with your top 20%. I've never liked that one, never been a big fan of it. I think it cripples an organization because to me, what it says is just realize that the people that aren't as strong aren't a critical part of whatever it is you're trying to solve for. Now, getting back to your example with lawn care or HVAC, like if you have 2 technicians that aren't as strong, as the rest of them, you're still sending those 2 technicians out to someone's home. And you run the risk of them providing a bad experience. You run the risk of, them messing up on a job that actually is going to cost you money because you got to go back and refix what you've done or et cetera. Same thing with your example of the edge up. Like if you've got 2 or 3 guys that aren't that good or young ladies that aren't that good, you run the risk every time you send them out to represent your brand and be the face of your company and deliver a poor experience because you're focusing on, the other 16 people or the other 5 people that do really good. Like there's a risk to that. So I think that rule to me is one that should be thrown out of the window.
All right, I'll keep that in mind next time we have a leadership meeting. I'll just
Make sure Terrence said no. All of us are created equal.
Absolutely. No, so talking about, you're talking about like you might have individuals on your team that maybe they don't perform as well, right? What's the answer for that, right? Do you cut them loose? Do you train them up? Like what? Obviously, it depends, right? It's not a one size fits all question. But what's your general take on that?
You have two choices, and again, this is going to sound very direct, but I'm going to explain a little bit why. You either coach them up or you coach them out. Now, coach them out sounds very harsh. It sounds very harsh, and it is. I mean, but honestly, but here's a lesson I've learned a long time ago. I've never in my career fired anyone ever, and here's why I say that. People fire themselves. People get let go because there's things within their role that they're not doing at the level that's expected. Right? I've never just walked up to anybody and go, "You no longer work here." Why? I just don't like the way you look. Like I've never done that. Right? It's so my point in that statement is sometimes you're actually doing people a favor. Because 9 times out of 10, the person that's not performing is usually miserable anyway. They're not happy. They wake up every morning. They don't want to come to work. They don't want to you're actually doing them a favor by allowing them the opportunity to go find a role where they can actually flourish and thrive. And no one will ever see it that way. No one will ever look at it that way. No one will ever feel that way. But in weeks, months, days, when they find that new job and they're happy again and they're fulfilled again, they're going to be glad. Now, they're not going to look back on it and go, "I am so glad that Ryan fired me. Like, if he hadn't let me go, I would still," they're not going to say that. They're still going to resent you. But at the end of the day, what they don't realize is they're in a better place, in a better situation that they would have been had they stayed. And I think a lot of times leaders make that mistake. Is we hold on to people longer than we should be. And one of the things that they don't realize is not only do they cripple that person, they cripple the organization. Because here's one thing about A players. A players want to be around other A players. I had this conversation with a buddy of mine because he's like, "I don't like all these athletes want to go play with these other athletes now. And sports isn't fun to watch because it's like all these super teams." And I go, "You know why they do it? Because they're tired of playing with people they don't think are good enough to play with them. And they want to go play with other talented players." Like, I can't blame them. Like, who wants to show up to work every day and have to carry the load? Like, who wants to be the one every day because guess what comes with carrying the load? The bullseye when you don't win, when the team plays, like the pressure comes with that. And so for those people who aren't performing, there's a pressure every day of knowing that they're not going to be able to live up to the expectation. And that's a lot to deal with. That's a lot of pressure. And so sometimes the best thing you can do is put them in a position to go find where they're meant to be. And you're helping them. But again, it doesn't feel like it. But I think your two options are give them everything, be very clear about what success looks like, be very clear about what it is they need to do, be very clear about giving them real-time feedback, and then be very clear about the things when they do them well that they should continue to do so they know it, and then get them to where they need to be. And if they can't get there, again, they don't wake up and say, "I want to suck." It's just not the role they're supposed to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's one of the guests we've had on in the past is Libby DeLucian, and one of her things that I'd first heard from her, I don't know if it's attributed directly to her or someone else, but like one of her philosophies around that is like not all turnover is bad turnover. And she runs like cleaning and organizing businesses.
I've met Libby before at the conference last year.
Well, then beautiful. Then you kind of already know where I'm going with this. But for all the listeners who don't know Libby, you should check her stuff out because she's
Absolutely.
Awesome. But also like, so she's in the business of cleaning, and not everyone wants to be a cleaning technician for like their entire life, like as a career, right? So like, either getting someone out, coaching someone out, or allowing them the space to be able to, not feel chained to the job to go do bigger and better things helps them in their life as well.
Absolutely right.
All right. Terence, do you read books at all?
I do.
All right. So I've got a last question for you here.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite leadership books you'd recommend? Or any last nuggets of wisdom you'd like to share before you go?
Yeah, so the book that I'm reading now is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I think the author is Ben Horowitz, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so here's what I'll say about leadership books, and this is why I always sparingly give advice about leadership books without knowing the person. I believe leadership books are always written in the best case scenario. It's always about how to take your employee who really wants to be good and can't get out of their way and make them better. Like how to turn around the organization that just needs to change the mindset. Like it's usually these like doable things that still require technique and require execution, but they're not real life. The reason that I was recommended that book was because he talks about his journeys as a business owner and the different roles he's played and firing his best friend and failing as a leader and rebuilding. Like he takes you through a journey, like his journey, like it's real. And so I think the leadership books that people read are based upon where they are in their leadership journey, which book they need to read, right? Because as you go through different things, you may not be at that point in your career that you're ready to read The Art of Strategic Leadership. Like you're not there yet. And so reading that book at this point in your journey is not going to be valuable for you. You're not going to really find any insight about it. And so it's really around like where you are. Now, I think there's some good foundational books like Seven Habits of Highly Effective Leader. You know, people have heard of Good to Great. Start with the Why. Like those are all books that people will recommend because like they're like considered great leadership books, and Stephen Covey and Jim Collins, like all these people who write all these great books. But at the end of the day, to me, I would rather talk to someone than read a book because talking to someone is going to allow you to get more real life nuggets and not situational scenario based, math equations around leadership. Because my experience has been, when I was first in the leadership and I was reading all these books and like, I'm going to try it. Like the method is this, like you take this, the method works as long as it's the profile of person you're talking to that book describes. Remember, meeting people where they are, right? So that method isn't going to work for everybody. When they're like, the first thing you want to do is you want to calm the individual and you want to talk about like, yes, if that person, if that person in that moment that works for them, and as a new leader, what are you going to do? You're going to use that in every scenario. You're going to use that in every single scenario, and it's not going to work, and you're going to get discouraged. And so, the reason I like, the hard thing about hard things is because he talks about just knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Like he talks about that and making difficult decisions and you know, having people come up to you, telling you what you should do when you're running your business and having to say, no, I'm going to do it this way and make a lot of people very upset because you know that people don't agree with, like, to me, it's real and it's raw. And so that's why I enjoyed the book. And he gives real life scenarios and real life situations. And so you kind of get the opportunity to learn from his lessons, right? Learn from the things that he didn't go out the way he won, right? You get to learn from the things he's learned from. So that's the book I'm reading now, and that's why I don't really recommend a lot of. I always call them self help books because that's
Mhm.
what leadership books feel like, right? Self help leadership books. So not knocking it for anybody who reads it. To each his own. My personal opinion.
Beautifully put. Uh, I lied. I have one more question
Okay.
because your answer gave this to me. So,
Uh-huh.
uh, right, like you can look at these books and stuff as a form of self investment. What are your thoughts on like finding a coach
I
that
love
like
that. Love that. I think it's critical because you need someone to help you navigate the landmines. You need someone who has sort of gone through some of the mistakes and some of the lessons learned. And you need someone to sort of talk through situations, right? Now, your coach could be your boss. It could be another coworker. It could be someone external. It's whoever you feel is going to bring value in your life. I also think your coach has changed because as you grow and navigate in your career, you need people that have been where you're going, right? And if someone who's never been there may not help you get to that journey, right? So if like I have a great relationship with my dad, I think he's like has a cape and an S on his chest as far as I'm concerned. And my dad has been just able to accomplish a lot of things professionally. And so I lean on him a lot. But if I ever get to a place in my career where he's never been at some point, not to say he's not going to bring value, but there will be a ceiling to his value because he's not been where I am to give me the value to tell me, like, this is how you may want to think about it. And so I think your coaches and your mentors evolve as you evolve. But I think one of the most important things is to have a mentor that you can call in situations to talk through and help them think through. The other reason I like it is sometimes we're so close to it that it's difficult for us to look past it. And when we talk
Mhm.
with coworkers that are our peers, they have a little bit of proximity to it as well. And so it's a little bit difficult for them to be unbiased. And so having that external coach helps because they have no skin in the game, if you will. And so they can give you, feedback. And so, but what I will tell you is they are a coach. That doesn't mean you have to do what they recommend. It is to help you think through sort of the narrative and think through the situation. It's your job then to figure out how to apply an action on that feedback. So being very clear, getting a coach doesn't make you void of the decision. It just helps you get to a decision. And so, I think it's very, very important. I would recommend everyone have a coach in their life.
And I will add lastly to that, because I agree with everything else said, is um, qualify your coach. And because you have a lot of people, I feel like in the days we're living in, you have people calling themselves all kind of things. But you said this several times, Terrence, value. Is this relationship bringing you value that you can quantify or qualify
Yeah.
in your life, your career? Yeah, just be able to discern.
No, that's
Yeah.
a great asterisk. Thank you for adding that because it is important, right? It's not just anybody. It needs to be somebody that brings value, and you do need to qualify who the coach is. It can't just, well, they used to be my manager. Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're running a service business, right, and you're looking for coaches, and you're at say you're at 100,000 right now. I'll use revenue as the example. Going from 100,000 to a million is one thing, but going from a million to 3 million is another thing. And then 3 to 5 and then 5 to 10, like those are all completely different journeys, right? So, Terrence, I completely agree. Like your coaches are going to change over time.
Absolutely.
I love how you
Absolutely.
said that.
Yeah. I mean, launch your millionaire, right? Like, how
Yeah.
many people looked and said, you're the first $1 million lawn care business, and like no one else has done it but you. And that's why that following was huge because that's what it's like. Why would you not follow someone and use the software of someone who has made it, has done it, right? But once you become that peer, it's like, okay, well, I've learned everything I can learn from you. I need to go find the $20 million person because I need to understand. Like you've never figured out or you've never at least got to a $20 million business. And as you said, Ryan, it's not the same steps, it's not the same journey. So I need to find someone who's done it so I can be the one to get to that journey. It's always like, I think I talked about in the last all hands, if you guys remember, I talked about like, breaking or eclipsing the 6 minute mile, right? It's like,
Mhm.
no one ever thought it was possible, but it took someone doing it for other people then to go, okay, how did they do it? And then I need to figure out what they did. And then it's the 4 minute mile. Like that's how it gets broken is someone comes in and does it. And then everyone learns from that. And then
Right.
they put a twist on it and they do it even better.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, well, Terrence, thank you so much for coming on
I
today.
enjoy being here. I'll tell you guys, it's been a
Thank you
heck of
so
a week,
much.
and this has been the highlight of my week. So I really enjoyed you guys having me. So thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate it. You're welcome
Yeah.
back on anytime you'd like. So
Anytime.
Just let
Yeah.
just
me
let
know
us
Seriously.
when.
know. So, Terrence, if people want to learn more about Xplor Technologies, whether it's Service Autopilot or FieldEdge, where should they be going?
Yeah, listen, I first of all have to give a shout out to our amazing marketing team. I mean, they're doing just a tremendous job of, keeping our brand out there and making sure that, people know who we are and the great things that we're doing as an organization. We have amazing podcasts like this. We're actively involved in our partnerships in our community, staying visible. We're constantly visible at at conferences, and obviously you can always go to our websites. You have our FieldEdge product, our Service Auto product, our Xplor website, or they can reach out to me directly. And I will direct them to where they need to go. So we want to make ourselves accessible and available to everyone. So, please don't hesitate to be a stranger to us and call us. And if you got any feedback about this great discussion we had today, I'd love to hear it. I'm always open to others' perspective on leadership and development and growth, because I think at the end of the day, there's no one right way to do it. It's just what works for you, and it's about what it is you're trying to solve for. And so I think at the end of the day, I'd love to get the feedback and continue to help our amazing customers and future customers realize their business ambition and allow us to partner with them to help them realize it. Like, we want to be the software for you that allows you to focus on what you do great and allow us to focus on what we do great. And that's what makes a partnership. Like, you don't want to think about, invoicing your customers or tracking your customers or anything like that. You just want to go provide a great service or experience, and you want to partner with a company that allows you to do that. And that's what we want to be for all of our customers and all of our future customers. And that's our role, and that's how we want to play it.
All right. Well, Terrence, thank you again so much for coming on. It's a pleasure. I'll see you around.
Absolutely.
It's not
I'll
goodbye.
be here.
All right, guys. Terrence,
See you
Becca,
guys
thank you so
soon.
much.